Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for having us here. And, it is really, as Naveed said, to look around the TOSD, GPDC, IATI, and of course the DAC, the Sevilla commitment, it called for a revitalized development cooperation forum, bringing together all of these different entities. And so I'm very happy to be here as part of this discussion to start this off. The Development Cooperation Forum, of course, it's not just focused on development effectiveness. It's broader than that, thinking about development cooperation more broadly and bringing together different communities and different perspectives on the issues. So I thought I would start with the development effectiveness vision in Sevilla, which, as was said, was to elevate country ownership and leadership by developing countries, as well as policy coherence by development partners as core principles of effective development cooperation, with a strong focus on results, inclusive partnerships, transparency, and mutual accountability. It also re-emphasized the existing GPDC principles and added policy coherence to them. Second, these are distilled into actions to turn these principles into action. And I sort of pulled out 8 things: responding to country plans and strategies, committing to multi-year cooperation agreements for stable and predictable funding, strengthening existing national systems rather than establishing parallel ones, ensuring all interventions incorporate elements of knowledge sharing, capacity building, and resilience building, striving to adopt a whole-of-government approach, and untying aid, and promoting national procurement and audit systems, and actions to reduce fragmentation, which include prioritizing core contributions to multilateral institutions and pooled funds, utilizing the respective strengths of MDB as horizontal providers and vertical platforms, really understanding when is it best to work with someone who has a balance sheet and can leverage versus funds that don't have that, and streamlining and harmonizing procedural and policy requirements. So there's a whole host of things that are in Sevilla, and the DCF is going to be thinking about, how do we follow up on all of this? And when we talk about development effectiveness post-Sevilla, really focusing on these 8 things. So the next place that we were thinking then is, how are we already doing? And the 2026 FSDR shows a Financing for Sustainable Development report, which all the colleagues here also contribute to, something we work on together, shows a very mixed picture. So responding to country platforms, maybe to start with that 42% in the DCF survey, 42% of responding countries reported receiving only partially complete information from development partners or none at all, and 30% reported that development partners sometimes or never provide timely information. Yeah, right. Thank you. That's a very good, that's the place that so there's some gaps here. When we're responding to country plans also based on SDG 17.5.1, which is a proxy for countries, for use of country systems, really based on GPDC data, development partners use country-owned results frameworks and planning tools in fewer than 2 out of 3 interventions, and it's basically back to the same level of 2018. So in terms of the second area, in terms of forward-looking predictability of development cooperation, it also remains limited. So again, the Financing for Development report using IATI data shows that only 15% of development partners publish budget information for 3 years into the future. Third, progress on untying aid is mixed. Overall, over 80% of bilateral aid is untied, but almost half of the value of untied contracts funded by DAC members are awarded to suppliers from their own countries. And frankly, the big focus we're having on blended finance may even increase this and make it worse. So I think blended finance has a lot of potential, but we need to make sure it doesn't end up leading to an increase in tied aid. So the share of bilateral ODA to core contributions in multilateral organizations and pool funds, as we all know, has declined in 2024 from 27% to 25%. So I think that there is scope to improve on all aspects of development effectiveness, from alignment with country priorities and systems to fragmentation to policy coherence. So what should we keep in between now and 2027, when we actually have the DCF in March and then the 2027 FFD Forum in April? It's really, how do we keep momentum on the development effectiveness agenda, and and address some of these issues. It's not straightforward in the current political context because in many ways the core effectiveness principles of country ownership and policy coherence are in many ways polar opposites to the narratives that we're all discussing now of self-interest narrative that many traditional donors have embraced, where how do we balance this with country ownership, I think is one of the challenges we have to think about. On the other hand, we also know that there's enormous growing interest. There are numerous initiatives, as we all know, on thinking about the purpose of development cooperation going forward. So I think that there's a lot of excitement on this question, and the question is, how do we make sure that we can move it forward in a positive way? So I'll just end with one last thing, thinking about some of the areas that we've been thinking about from our side. Obviously, first is country ownership. How do you make country ownership real? What concrete steps can we do to move that forward? The second is, in that essence, we're also thinking of how do we strengthen and rethink the DCF survey to make it fit for purpose in the post-Sevilla context. We're also focusing a lot on impact. On impact, it's a red thread across the FFD agenda, but how should it be defined and measured? And really thinking of bringing together, there are so many different groups that are looking at measuring and thinking about impact from very different perspectives. The MDBs are doing it, some other PDBs are doing it, bilateral donors are doing it, and the private sector is frankly doing it, and at least the impact investors in very different worlds. Can we bring those together to think through what does impact mean and how do we measure it? Allocation questions are also really important across countries, but also across actors, as I mentioned, MDBs versus vertical funds, and also across modalities such as blended finance, budget support, et cetera. So just to give you some of the places that we're thinking of, I probably spoke for too long, so apologies.